I'll let Marcia.
You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome. I want to welcome our candidates and thank them for joining us tonight, all our candidates. I want to welcome our distinguished moderator, Herb Jackson, Washington correspondent for the Record in USA Today. I want to acknowledge our electeds. Keith Kasmark, re-elected to Woodland Park. Way to go. Back there, you want to, and Michael Soriano. Yeah, Soriano, sorry. The Parsippany Mayor-elect. What a great race. Way to go. Al Anthony, he's our Livingston councilman, former mayor, and future mayor. And we are privileged to have two county chairs here. Chip Robinson, you're home right in Morris County. And my chairman, a Democratic chairman, Leroy Jones of Essex County. Thank you all for coming. And I want to thank everyone for your commitment to this process. Democracy is a fragile system, and it depends on an informed electorate. It really depends on information, it depends on the press, and it depends on all citizens. All right, having the information available and finding it. So that is why Blue Wave is committed to having forums such as this across the entire state. All right, and just to let you know, next week we're going to have a forum for the 7th Congressional District, a week from tonight. All right, and there are flyers back there if you'd like to come to that one. Well, I want to tell you that not just being a committed voter, you need to get out and work. You need to first find out about your candidates, find out about the system, be informed, then get involved, all right? Get your neighbors involved. And then finally, vote and get everyone you know to vote, all right? Every election is important. Your local election, congressional election, as well as the presidential. They're all important. They all change your lives and the lives of your children. However, I could not overstate the importance of the election, the congressional elections coming out next November. All right? That election matters. So that's why we're all here. Thank you for coming.
My name is Siley Avalenda, and I'm with NJ11 for Change. And on behalf of our organization, thank you. I wanted to thank everyone who came tonight and also everyone at home. But more than that, I wanted to thank every single member of our group who has made democracy a verb over the last year, who has done the work that Marcia talks about, who has become engaged, involved, who has really, really fought for this district, because without you guys, this panel of exemplary candidates wouldn't be here. So thank you all on our behalf for all of the work you're doing, and I will put you all to work for the next year, I promise. I also want to thank our tech team, that's what I was trying to say, for all of their efforts in putting this together, and also to thank Ray for the extraordinary graphics that he always does on short notice, most of the time. So, tech team and Ray, our graphics person. Because we're all volunteers and we do this all as a labor of love, and no one has to give us their time and no one has to be here for us, no one has to help us, but they do, and we really, really appreciate it. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Herb Jackson, who's going to moderate tonight's forum. Everybody here should know Herb as a Washington correspondent for the Record. So I'll let him introduce himself and also explain the forum rules for everyone.
Thank you, and thanks for coming out on a weeknight 6 months before the 2018 primary. I wanted to just go over, we have 5 Democrats and 1 Republican who want to be the next member of Congress from the 11th District, which, as you probably know, covers Passaic, Morris, and Essex counties. You probably know the current representative is Rodney Frelinghuysen. He is in Washington tonight where the House is in session. He was invited to attend. I am not affiliated with Blue Wave or New Jersey 11th for Change, but I was happy to agree to appear and oppose some questions. The questions came from a bunch of different places. Some of them were submitted by you to New Jersey 11th. Some of them came from people who contacted me. Some of them came from things I would ask candidates if I were interviewing them, and that's what I'm hoping to be able to do tonight. A word about the format. You have 6 candidates. We want to get 90 minutes. We're already 15 in. We're not going to ask everybody every question. For the first couple rounds, we're going to ask everybody every question. Then we're going to go to questions for each individual person. If somebody 2 persons down wants to answer the question the other guy got or the other woman got, they can use their 90 seconds for that. The first round, they're going to have 2 minutes to answer. There are going to be signs here in the front that say 15 seconds and stop. Please do. Don't make me come out of there. The second round, after the first round, the question's going to be answers are going to be 90 seconds. We want to save time for everybody to have 2-minute closing responses. If we're running really late, we might make one of the rounds 60 seconds, but we shall see. Please don't interrupt. We've also asked the candidates to keep their responses to the time allotted and to the question, and to talk about what they would do if they were in office and not about other people on the stage or not on the stage. And finally, we ask all of you, since you all got to clap a lot, not to get too involved so that doesn't waste our time. And now, since the only person in the room, I think, who came to hear me speak is my aunt from Wayne, I'm going to introduce who's here. Starting on this end, we have John Bartlett of Wayne, Mitchell Cobert of Morristown, Tamara Harris of Verona, Martin Hewitt of East Brunswick, Mikey Sherrill of Montclair, and Martin Washburn of Mendham. We had a drawing earlier. We're going to go in for who gets the question first, and then after that we're going to go in alphabetical order, which is how they're seated. And Mark Washburn won the coin toss. And I'm not going to ask him what he thinks about Eli being benched. So the first question is, what legislation would you support, oppose, or sponsor to deal with gun violence? And you have 2 minutes.
First of all, thank you, 11th for Change and Blue Wave New Jersey for inviting us here. Thank you, candidates, for coming here. If I may, I would like to say something to my students at County College of Morris. Good evening, historians. Gun violence is something that really concerns me a lot. I have a family member who passed away because there was a gun in the house. They had a bad day. And so to me, this is something that I am passionate about. I feel that we need to do something about it. One statistic I was looking at when I was trying to prepare for this was how many guns deaths occurred in the United States versus Japan. And in the United States, I think the year was 2013, we saw around 30,000 gun deaths. In Japan, which has about a third of the population that we have, they had just 13. So we need to do something. We need to address that issue. We need to have background checks, universal background checks, and we also need to take assault weapons off the market. We've got to take guns and make some changes with that. Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to Blue Wave New Jersey and to NJ11 for Change for sponsoring tonight. Thank you to our hosts here at the Unitarian Fellowship with sharing this beautiful space with all of us. And thank you to all of you here in the room and at Drew and at all the other places around the district and around the world that you may be watching this on your computer screen for being part of tonight. This is important stuff. My favorite television president, Josiah Bartlett, said, thank you, said, decisions get made by the people who show up. And what all of you in this room and so many of you watching us have been doing over this past year is showing up amazingly. On Fridays in Morristown, on Wednesdays in Wayne, every day, all over the district, standing up for the things that we believe in, and it is so exciting, and it is why I believe that 2018 is going to be a transformative year in the 11th Congressional District. Excuse me. I couldn't be prouder to have the chance to come before you and talk about my record of results in elected office over these 5 years since I defeated Republican incumbents to become a freeholder in Passaic County. But what I can tell you is consistently across the district as I listen to people, the good news for so many of us in this room with the things that we believe is that the issues people are talking about are not those wedge issues that the other party used to use to divide Americans from each other. They're bridge issues. They're issues that bring us together across party, across the various backgrounds that we may have here, and one of those issues is guns. And I grew up around guns. I grew up in a place where the first day of school, the first day of deer season was a school holiday. But I am horrified by the fact that even on issues that virtually every American agrees on, like universal background checks, we still seem to be stymied by the NRA in Washington, D.C. I would stand up against that consistently, and I'm out of time, but I'll talk more about it in a bit.
Mr. Coburn.
Thank you. I think the issue of Time magazine brought it home to me. It was a number of years ago, and they had 365 pictures in that magazine, and every single one was a person that was killed by a gun. And that's what brings it home to the readers. That's what brings it home to all of us, that gun violence and the issues with gun violence is not something that affects other people. It affects every one of us. There has to be a stop. As you've heard, the gun violence in this country kills more people, and it's senseless. It kills children. It kills people that we love. There has to be some kind of responsible control over the guns. There has to be some regulation that makes sense. Where I come from, I think all of us should work together to resolve those issues. There shouldn't be partisanship. Yes, of course, there are going to be people that protect the Second Amendment. We all believe in that. We understand that there are hunters that feel passionately about protecting wildlife. But there are others that have common sense positions and have to control the violence that there is. There has to be some kind of regulation. Thank you.
Ms. Harris.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I wanted to thank, first of all, Blue Wave and NJ11 for Change for hosting all of us here tonight. And it's very inspiring and empowering to see everyone in this room and everyone that's in the satellite spaces of Facebook and the university, the level of engagement and empowerment and activism around the issues that matter to us in the community is inspiring, and it's one of the reasons I'm running. With respect to gun violence, I come at it from many different angles. I teach at NYU at the social work school, and I teach the next generation of social workers how to be more proactive in their outreach and their work in the communities. And in addition, I've also worked with families in crisis. As a divorce coach, I sometimes deal with domestic violence issues. And when it comes to gun control, I say two things. One is we have to deal legislatively with what's an easy to do. It is an easy to do to be more proactive and more aggressive in terms of making sure that the mentally ill who are harmed to themselves physically and to others physically cannot acquire a gun. So that's the first piece of legislation that I would touch. The second one is I would never, ever allow bump stock and other devices like that that can literally accelerate the killing power of a basic gun and turn it into an automatic assault weapon. That is not I believe, what the Second Amendment is about and what that protects. And I am for the preservation of the Second Amendment right, but not in those circumstances. Check those two boxes. The other thing that I will say in terms of an advocate and a potential congresswoman if I were in the legislative space is I would be focusing on guns and the use of guns in the domestic violence space. I have done some work with the Georgia State Bar and made a presentation on the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And guns are used, and when they are used in domestic violence issues, especially by boyfriends who do not have to lose their guns if they are penalized in a situation, I would be closing the boyfriend loophole and working on the laws to perpetuate that because Jersey has very strong laws. Those would be the three things I would do.
Mr. Hewitt, you just pull it out.
Again, I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me, Blue Wave and NJ11. I am a bit of an oddity up here as the sole Republican, please no hissing. But while I am a Republican, I am very much a social liberal, although I am a fiscal conservative. And while there is a constitutional right to bear arms, the introduction of the Constitution discusses life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those two are not in conflict. However, we do have to have more rigorous background checks. We do have to have a ban on weapons of what I will call mass destruction. You don't need a semi-automatic weapon to go deer hunting. You don't need a silencer on a gun to go deer hunting. And again, recreational use of guns certainly makes sense. I think what we need is a common sense approach. Now, one reason, as I say, I started this by saying I'm a Republican, note that I am wearing a purple tie. I do that because I believe that while there are red and blue states, we have to start thinking not as parties, but as Americans. In fact, on my webpage, what I point out at the very first sentence is, I am an American running as a Republican in order to serve all the people of my district. That being said, we have to do away as much as we can with labels and start solving problems. And I think all of our goal tonight, and I think we share a common goal, first is to get rid of the congressman who is presently in that office, who is unresponsive, and secondly, to elect the best one of us who is up here now. And by the way, I think each one of us would agree that whoever does win, we would all volunteer to help the others, and gladly do so. So thank you once again. I'm very happy to be here.
Ms. Sherrill.
Good evening. As Herb said, my name is Mikey Sherrill, and I'd like to thank Blue Wave and NJ11 for Change for setting up this wonderful forum. We all know just how important this election is to us. You know, I've been around guns my whole life. My father was a hunter. When I was in the Navy, I was qualified as an expert in both the rifle and the pistol. So I know the destructive power of guns, and I know how important it is that we have gun safety in place in this country. The level of violence that we're facing is not normal. I remember when Sandy Hook happened. I remember driving home from work, and I had a kindergartner at the time. And all I could think about as I drove home was how awful it would be if that was my daughter, if I was driving home that night to that event in my own family. And so I'll say again, this is simply not normal. We need to have rules in place so that people on the terrorist watch list don't have access to guns. We need to make sure that people that are domestic abusers don't have access to guns. We need to make sure that people with severe mental illness don't have access to guns. And we also need to keep the gun rules in place that we already have. So for example, we need to make sure that we still have regulations regarding silencers, because many people in an active shooter situation say that they knew to get away from that situation because they heard the gunfire. Many law enforcement officials say they knew how to handle that situation and knew how to pinpoint the violence because they heard the gunfire. And so I'm proud to say tonight that I have been endorsed by Americans for Responsible Solutions, which is Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly's group, and I will work very hard on this issue. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next round is going to start with Mr. Bartlett. How would you work with President Trump? Are you going there to impeach him? And did you think Bill Clinton should have been impeached?
Yeah, to start me with that one.
Welcome to Jersey.
I am. Oh, I know Jersey. I am going to Washington, D.C. first and foremost with the help of all of you in this room and with all the voters in the 11th District to listen to this district and to respond to its needs and concerns. The questions that you asked are, am I there to stand up to Trump? Am I there to impeach Trump? I'm certainly there to stand up to President Trump on all kinds of issues, as I did this morning with his awful tweeting, but really as I've done throughout his presidency, including from the very beginning, when President Trump adopted the Muslim ban executive order. I not only stood up on that and spoke out, but I organized my colleagues on the Freeholder Board to pass a resolution to say, no, this is a place where all are welcome. The American principle is that all are welcome, and we don't single people out on their faith or on their creed. Impeachment's not a question that I think any of us can answer from here. The constitutional standard is clear, high crimes and misdemeanors. I think we're going to continue to learn a lot more about what has been going on with the range of issues that Mr. Mueller is currently investigating. I am hopeful to continue learning more about that. We will see where that takes us, and we'll see what decision Congress may be in a position to reach. But one thing that I do know is that the essential task for us as Democrats right now is to make sure that in districts like this, we send people to Washington who will stand up.
Mr. Coburn.
Thank you. With regard to President Trump, I wouldn't be here right now running if I wasn't terribly troubled by many, many of the things that have been passed by or attempted to be passed by the Congress right now and by actions that have been taken by President Trump. I've been terribly troubled when reporters are disrespected, when Gold Star families are disrespected, and when certainly a hero in our country, Senator McCain, has been disrespected. We're here because we want to vote, and we want to vote people in that care about our country. I don't know that it's proper to talk about impeachment, but I know it is proper that we're here to be able to exercise our privilege, to be able to vote out people that don't respect the morals and the principles of our country. With respect to President Clinton, there were times when President Clinton, in my opinion, did not respect the law. And there were times when, as citizens, we could very easily have criticized him. We can criticize every president that we have. We can criticize every senator, every elected official. And the equalizer is every one of you have to get out and vote. Thank you.
Ms. Harris.
Thank you. So when I have to just say that I am, on one hand, grateful for President Trump, because if he hadn't won, I wouldn't be here sitting on this dais with you. And we have to be honest about what his presidency has inspired and activated in so many of us. I have to say, if the other candidate, Hillary, had won, I wouldn't be here. I would be assuming life would be happy, and we could go about our business. But that is not the country we live in. And we have to deal with some very serious issues as our country is in crisis, and I think our leadership is in crisis. One of the things that I learned as a social worker, and is very important in how we do our work, is you have to meet the client where they're at, with no judgment. And I think anyone that is offering to serve this constituency in this district has to have the capacity to be able to sit at the table with people that they are diametrically opposed to, because it is the start of collaboration. It is the start of being able to work together. And that is how I would approach this work. We have leaders in Congress that do not believe in what the president is doing, but they have to go to the White House, they have to sit with their colleagues, they have to try to find a space and build a bridge. And that is how I would approach this work. I think that with regard to impeachment, whether it's this president or any previous presidents, one of the things that gives me peace is the foundation of our laws that protect this country and provide a process which is taking place right now, and it is going to take a while. And I would be supportive of that process if the information provided the details to actually create that impeachment journey.
Mr. Hewitt.
Thank you. First of all, I agree that if Trump has done anything for us, he has shown us the fragility of democracy. And I think the reason that we are all here is just because of Trump and those who were elected along with him. So in a strange way, we owe him thanks for getting us where we are today, which is ready to fight back in ways that I don't think we have done since the 1960s. As to supporting Trump, I know I'm a Republican, but again, America first. I can't support any man who is, or a woman who is a divider, not a uniter. I can't support someone who supports racism. I can't support anyone who is against law-abiding immigrants. As to Bill Clinton, it's interesting that that's part of the question, because when I was in law school, my law professor and political mentor was a man named Peter Adino, who for most of you may not remember who he was. But he asked the exact same question: should he be impeached? In an entire class who was sitting there, I was the only student who said, yes, he should be. He asked why. I laid out the constitutional argument that he invoked he violated executive privilege by the cover-up itself. And the fact is, at the end of the day, Republican or Democrat, we all have to obey the rule of law. Thank you.
Ms. Sherrill.
Well, I stand up to President Trump. I have been dying to stand up to President Trump. Yes. Yes, I will. You know, I went to the Naval Academy. I took my first oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States when I was 18 years old. That is an oath I took many times over the next several years, because I served as a helicopter pilot in the Navy, and then I served at the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor. When I saw what this president was doing, when I saw that he was going against every value that I hold dear, when he was attacking women, when he was attacking minorities, Gold Star families, POWs, even federal judges, I knew that I had to act. I am dying to stand up to him. And when I saw that this congressman was refusing to even hold a town hall meeting to discuss with us why he was voting the way he was voting, why he's voting to take health care away from 23 million people, why he's voting to get rid of the tax deductions that here in New Jersey we really rely on, why he's voting to defund Planned Parenthood when we can tell you just how quickly women's health care goes down the drain, I knew I had to act. So yes, in short, I will be standing up to President Trump. Thank you.
Mr. Washburn.
Yes, I would impeach Donald Trump. And I was thinking of a different president, something that happened 45 years ago. Shortly after 1 a.m. on the night of June 17th, 1972, a security guard at the Watergate complex found a piece of masking tape. He removed it, only to find that it was taped again. He called the police. The police came and found 5 people in the Democratic National Committee's headquarters. And from there, with electronic devices and cameras, well, we didn't know it at the time, but 6 days later, on June 23rd, Richard Nixon held a meeting with his Attorney General. His name was John Mitchell, and he said to John Mitchell, block the FBI from investigating this Watergate break-in. FBI, stop it, right? Well, so that's what happened. It didn't affect Nixon because he said it was a third-rate burglary. He went on to beat George McGovern in a landslide. McGovern won only just Massachusetts, right? And I see my time is short here. But basically, we found out that Nixon had blocked it. And when the tapes were revealed, it said that he had blocked it. Nixon resigned, and we hope that Donald Trump resigns too for blocking the FBI.
Mr. Colbert, I'm going to go to you with this one. What's your, and this actually came in from Justin in West Orange, who was filed through New Jersey 11. What's your preferred solution for health care? Is it Medicare for all, Obamacare with a public option, Obamacare with some fixes to it, or some less government-involved solution?
Thank you, Justin. The Affordable Care Act has to be retained. It has to be enforced. If there are any issues that can improve it, then we need common sense and common ground to be able to improve those issues. We cannot stand idly by when it is attempted to be repealed and not replaced. That's not acceptable. We have a responsibility to all of our citizens. We have a responsibility to maintain their health, and we have a responsibility to maintain common sense to be able to protect our citizens and not to deprive these hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people of what is so dear to them. In my own family, this goes back years, there was a time when my father could not afford health insurance, and he had a heart attack, and his life savings were used up. I know the pain that is caused when health care is deprived. People's families are disrupted. Their life savings are gone, and we need to do whatever we can to protect ACA.
Ms. Harris.
So I believe in healthcare for all. I had to deal with multiple family members, from my grandfather to my father to my mother, who sometimes we had to make some very painful decisions. In my 20s, I had to take care of my grandfather as his guardian as he was declining in health, and had to deal with Medicare and Medicaid, and went on the same healthcare journey with my father. And at that time, as a young woman in her 30s, I was fortunate enough to have the resources to be there for my father. But because of my experience with my grandfather, because of many other experiences in my background in social work and helping families in crisis, I know that lack of health care is literally one of the things that can cause a catastrophic change and shift in a person's livelihood and outcome. And I do not believe that you have to make a decision, and that lack of health care means the difference between being homeless and owning your home. So I would work to fix Obamacare. The country has spoken. When people have tried to take it away, they have said, do not take away my health care. We have something that we fought hard for, and our president fought hard for, and our Congress fought hard for. So I would work to fix it, and I would work to make sure that we have really make a decision in this country that health care is a right and a privilege for all our citizens, and no one should have to suffer because of lack of health care. Thank you.
Mr. Hewitt?
Healthcare is the most important issue of our time. It accounts for, I believe, 6 or 7% of our economy. Obamacare, is it perfect? No, and President Obama admits to that. When I have some neighbors without health care and others spending $35,000 a year for a very basic plan, there is something wrong. But you don't repeal something like Obamacare, you fix it. We had to fix Medicare and Medicaid. Eventually we will go to a single-payer system. It may not be in my political lifetime, but we have to continue to work together. What concerns me, and the reason I'm running as a moderate Republican, is that the ultra-conservative Republicans who are presently wreaking havoc are not serving the people if they take away health care from 10, 20, 30 million people. It doesn't make sense. And in terms of my fiscal conservatism, somebody might say, well, this doesn't sound very fiscally conservative. But let's think a moment. If we have a healthy population, then we have people who can work. If we have people who can work, they can buy products and services of others. They can pay taxes. The system would actually pay for itself. And I think that's what we have to think about, and again, I will keep on saying it at every turn, work together, not work in tribes. Thank you.
You know, recently my father was diagnosed with lung cancer. And unfortunately, this isn't the first time that he's had cancer. He's a cancer survivor. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma about 10 years ago. And so I worry about my dad's quality of life. I worry about his nutrition. I worry about whether he's taking care of himself. I worry about whether he's happy with his doctor and he's taking his doctor's advice. But I don't worry that this is going to bankrupt my mom and dad. I don't worry that he's not going to have access to medical care. Because he's 65 now. Actually, he's older. He's over 65 by quite a bit. And so he's taken care of. And before that, he had employer-based health care. But for too many people, as we've just heard, Getting sick, having yourself or your child or a loved one get sick, bankrupted families. If you had a child with a pre-existing condition, they were uninsurable. And now we've fought to take care of some of these problems. And in the last administration, we had more people insured than at any other time in our history. We need to fight now to make sure that every single American has quality and affordable health care. We can do better. Thank you.
Mr. Washburn?
In looking at health care, I would, before I approved anything, if I was in Congress, I'd look for three things. One, that it recognized health care as a right, not a privilege, that we cover everybody, that pre-existing conditions get covered, and that there are no caps. Now, having said that, I am concerned about employer-based insurance. In tracing it, I'm a historian, so the first insurance came in 1910. Montgomery Ward's offered it $28. By 1940, just 10% of people got their health care through their employer. But by 1950, that had gone up to 50%, mainly because during World War II, they had a freeze on wages, and to get around that, they offered health care. So we, in the United States, developed this, we're going to get our health care through our employer. But it didn't cover various groups. It didn't cover people who were unemployed. It didn't cover seniors. It didn't cover people who didn't get it through their employer, right? So we ran into some problems. 1979, we were doing pretty good. 97% of the people got their health care through their employer. But by 1991, that was down to 83%. And it's broken. So what I would like to see is us to go to a single payer. I'd like to see health care for all.
Mr. Bartlett?
Healthcare is probably the ultimate example of what I was talking about earlier as those bridge issues, those issues that bring us together across the district and across partisan divides. I kicked my campaign off this summer with 30 coffees in 30 days, and every last place I went, whether it was Bloomfield or whether it was Mendham, whether it was Randolph or Wayne, people had a healthcare story. And the challenge that we face is one that I see as a freeholder in Passaic County, because among the many other things we do, we run a 406-bed nursing home, extended care facility. And some of our patients have Medicare, and some have Medicaid, some are on Social Security, private pensions, private insurance, some pay out of their pocket. But that whole economy of how our healthcare at that facility is paid for affects everyone's care. And that's the issue that people are now paying attention to, is that wherever you may get your health care, we're all in this together. And when somebody like Congressman Fruehlinghausen votes, as he did, to roll back the Affordable Care Act and take out that Medicaid expansion and take out the women's health coverage and take out the other things that the Affordable Care Act implemented, that affects all of us. In terms of a solution, I believe we need to fix the Affordable Care Act. It's clear that there are ways in which it's not working its best in terms of the exchanges, in terms of the incentives. Some legislators have proposed a Medicare buy-in option for certain consumers. That may make sense. We've got to get the economics working, not by taking anything away, but by making sure everybody who needs the care gets the care that they need.
Okay, we have one more for each of you. I'm going to start with Ms. Harris. How would you define a fair tax system, and how important is it that the system we have now be overhauled?
So I'll start with the second question. It's crucial. I think next to healthcare, to me, that and education are the three priorities in this country. But I have to tell you that as someone who has studied economics, lived in Asia for 10 years, and seen a lot of different models and seen the deficit in this country, I think that we have to settle issues like what healthcare are people entitled to in this country and what Medicaid and Medicare people are entitled to in this country. Because if we don't come to that conclusion first, they will continue to be used as the dipping pool to fund unfair tax reform that enriches a lot of people that don't need those benefits. And so, yes, we need a more efficient tax code. I am for that. What I do think that we need to focus on in tax reform is making sure that middle class and working class families have a chance at economic viability and mobility. This current tax plan does none of that. Many of us, I've spoken to many folks, people who are resourced, and there are a lot of people in this country that have said, I'm willing to pay more taxes if we make sure that we deal with income inequality, because we all are in this together. And if we don't figure out a way to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're not penalizing middle class and working class families, teachers, graduate students, the cruel things that we're seeing in this current tax plan, we have to figure out a way to do that effectively, and we have to figure out a way to make sure that nothing is going into the pockets of people who don't need those resources at the expense of people who actually do, because that's how they stay viable and that's how they contribute to our economy.
Mr. Hewitt?
We have to first ask a more basic question before we can even talk about tax overhaul. What are our priorities as a country? Until we know what our priorities are, what we need money for, to go and modify the tax code almost looks like an excuse to do what is being done right now. Giving tax breaks to the wealthy, 400 of whom, by the way, have written a letter to Congress saying we don't want these tax breaks. We can't spend all the money we have. We should all have this problem, by the way. But you have to ask yourself, how is it fiscally conservative with the current plan? And I actually tweeted both Frelinghuysen and Trump, not that anyone got back to me. How is it fiscally conservative to raise the deficit by $1.5 trillion? That's the exact opposite of fiscal conservatism. So while we do need to update the code, the first thing we have to do is say, as Americans, not Republicans and Democrats, I'm going to keep emphasizing this, but as Americans, what are our core principles? What are our core priorities? And that's what I think we really have to be concentrating on, and then get to the question of tax reform. Thank you.
Michelle.
I've been thinking a lot about the future of this state and where we're headed. And this Republican tax bill will cripple the state of New Jersey. Cripple it. The Republican Party is simply not investing in the Northeast. And when this president said that somehow New Jersey was taking advantage of the country, I'd like to point out to the president that we get back about 70 cents on every dollar we send to the federal government. I think if anybody's being taken advantage of right now, it's the citizens of New Jersey. And so when this Republican tax bill, which Rodney Frelinghuysen voted onto the floor, this Republican tax bill will take away our ability to deduct our state and local taxes, even though we pay some of the highest property taxes in the country. It will take away our ability to deduct our student interest loans, even though we should really be investing in our students, making it easier to pay for college. It'll take away our ability to deduct our mortgage interest and to deduct our medical expenses. We've been talking a lot about how bad medical care can already be, and we're making it worse now with this tax bill. So the first thing I'd like to do, if I go to Washington, is to fight against this really bad Republican tax plan. Because what I think a tax plan needs to do is invest in the middle class and invest in small businesses. This country has done incredibly well because we've had a strong middle class. Thank you so much.
Mr. Washburn.
I'm glad you brought this up, taxes, because it gives me a chance to go back to health care, because I'm concerned about an invisible tax that we all pay. Every time I tell this to my students, when they pay their tuition, they're paying for part of my health care. But it doesn't cover everybody because we have a lot of adjuncts. So it's going to the privileged people. We're all paying this invisible tax. Every time you buy something, you're paying for someone's insurance. And then you have those people come out and say, oh, those poor people, well, they should be paying for their own insurance. Well, they're paying for everybody's insurance. Every time we buy something, you pay your cable, you're paying for someone's health insurance. When you buy your car, you're paying for someone's health insurance. So for me, solving that problem, health care, doing away with the invisible tax that we're all paying is something that I'm in favor of. As far as the recent tax bill proposed by the Republicans, I'm also concerned about the deficit and the debt. I don't think that we should borrow money from our children in order to give big tax breaks to the rich. I just don't think that's right. Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett.
The Republican tax plan is part and parcel of an outlook on the American economy that is simply backwards. If there's one thing we've learned from the last couple decades of history, it's that you don't cut your way to economic growth, and that the theories behind tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy and for corporations just don't hold up. When Passaic County got our 5th consecutive credit rating upgrade earlier this month, it wasn't because we cut taxes or we cut spending, it was because we made smart investments in things like infrastructure in our county and attracted businesses and helped small businesses in our county grow and thrive. That's what folks are trying to accomplish. That's what we're all trying to do. You talk about eliminating the student loan interest deduction. I take that very, very personally. I'm still paying off my law school loans, and I will be until 2032. These things have real impacts on real people. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Passaic County Central Labor Council because they recognize that if we're trying to grow the middle class, if we're trying to support business here in New Jersey, we do it with smart investments. We do it with effective use of economic policy. The tax plan that the Republicans have is completely backwards in that regard, punishing those of us that are working hard, that have gotten things like student loan costs, like Medicare costs, like medical costs, and rewarding those who need it least. I think a smarter tax plan, one that not just helps the middle class, but that helps local areas like ours grow business and help everybody thrive.
Mr. Colbert.
Thank you. What terrifies me is the evaporation of the middle class. Tax reform has to come back, and it has to restore values and ability of the middle class to thrive. What we have now proposed in Congress is an assault on the middle class. What we also have to do, if we want viable tax reform, is we have to encourage businesses. We have to allow businesses to start up. We have to incentivize them. We have to have some common ground to be able to help all of our citizens earn a living. What we have proposed in Congress right now is an assault. We only have proposals now to help the 1%, and that cannot be tolerated. What we have to do is we have to band together to protect our right as citizens to vote and vote against reform in tax that is not a reform. This is an attack against our values in New Jersey as far as our property values. It's an attack against us in New Jersey, against ability to pay our deductions in order to be able to survive and continue as citizens. And I think that we have to act together to oppose the proposed tax law in Washington. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to go to the one question to each person, and I'm going to go back to the winner of the draw, Mr. Washburn, for the first one, and then you'll get a different question, and you'll get a different question, but if you want to jump in on the earlier question, enjoy yourself. Groups that are supporting Palestinians are trying to put pressure on Israel through a series of boycotts, divestment, sanctions. Congress is trying to deal with this with a bill that would prohibit American companies from cooperating with international organizations that are advocating BDS. Would you support that bill?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it in more detail. I lived in Saudi Arabia when I first got out of college. And when I first got there, I dealt with people, and I thought they were different than me, and I was, it was a different culture for me. But over time, after I was there a couple months, I saw people, and like, this person reminds me of somebody back home. This person reminds me of somebody back home, and I became friends with them. So I'm very offended when Donald Trump talks about a Muslim ban, because he's lumping all these people into one group, and that just really upsets me. Now, I'm not sure about how I would go with this bill, but I think in the Middle East we have to come together. somehow we have to bring all the people to the table on that.
Okay, Mr. Bartlett, under what circumstances should abortion be illegal? And would you support taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood's non-abortion health services?
I absolutely would. I'm pro-choice, proudly and strongly so. The issue of abortion, the issue of health care for women is one that is private and personal between the patient and her doctor. I think that's an area where government intrusion does not belong. We have, unfortunately, an administration right now that is moving in all the wrong directions, not only with strengthening the global gag rule, but also, as Congressman Frulinghuysen did earlier this year, voting to eliminate Title X funding, $300 million for women's diagnostic, preventive health care, and family planning, cut to zero by Congressman Frulinghuysen as chair of the Appropriations Committee. That's appalling. It's moving in the wrong direction in the same way that trying to eliminate the Affordable Care Act mandates for free birth control and for other specific protections for women and the care of women's health is appalling. It's moving in the wrong direction. All of this relates to the broader issue of women's equality and the fact that whatever we're talking about, whether we're talking about equal pay in the workplace, whether we're talking about reproductive health care, whether we're talking about the opportunity not to put up with what we're seeing so much in the news these days, but which is by no means a new problem. We need absolutely more support in whatever way we can for women's rights, including reproductive health care, but including a whole range of other issues.
Mr. Coburn, how would you change the campaign finance system, and what would you do if a super PAC started spending money in support of your campaign?
I think the campaign election laws are flawed, they're unfair, and I think that it should be a process where there is a limit on all of the funding that is allowed. Right now, you have corporations controlling, you have different interests controlling. So if you ask yourself, why do we have gun control? Who benefits from that? Who are the ones that actually receive the benefit? And the answer is the NRA. Who gives the contributions to the politicians? And the answer is, if you look at each legislation and you look at some of the things that are happening now, if you follow the money, you will be able to see sometimes the influence on our elected officials. Right now, I have no funding other than word of mouth, other than people that I know, other than people that are going to support me and my principles. If a super PAC were to go and give me some money, I would say fine, but no strings attached. I don't care who gives me money. I will not change my viewpoint at all. And I think that the important point that has to be made is whether or not there's a tie-in to the people that contribute the money versus the principles of the people that actually are elected.
Okay. Ms. Harris, should undocumented residents who came to the United States as children be required to leave? And what kind of strengthening would you support on the border with Mexico?
Thank you for that. So no, undocumented children who came here through no choice of their own and through their parents' desire for a better life. This is what we're seeing with the Dreamers here in this country and in New Jersey. It's about 22,000 Dreamers. They need to be here. We cannot have children who are credible and viable people who are making a contribution to our economy, who are paying taxes and getting nothing in result, live in fear of their lives and be ripped apart from their families and their support structures. I do not support that. I'm from the Caribbean, and when I grew up in the Virgin Islands, I saw many families coming to make a better way, and sometimes they made choices, desperate choices, to improve their life, and their children that were born in that location had the right and the privilege to stay there, and that is something I will support as a Congresswoman, and that is something that I think if you make a commitment, you cannot break that promise. With respect to a wall, I do not support any part of that advocacy. I mean, that to me, from the day our president descended on an escalator and talked about Mexicans and African Americans, I was very clear about what his presidency was about, and I am not confused about my advocacy, and I will have no part of any border wall. And if we have a wall, it's going to be around Donald Trump and his swamp, and that is what I will vote for.
Mr. Hewitt, do you believe climate change is real? And if you do, to combat it, should people pay more for energy?
Of course it's real. That's the first answer. I mean, come on. I don't think anyone here is a member of the Flat Earth Society. I do believe that we do have to combat the trouble that has been caused, but as I recently attended a meeting, an environmental meeting, and learned about all the myriad ways in which alternative energy, wind, solar, whatever, there are so many opportunities to have cheap, affordable energy. It's not a matter of paying more. It's a matter of developing those industries to bring the cost down. Now, what I do as an attorney is I help small businesses raise funds and comply with state securities laws in the 50 states and 4 territories. And some of those businesses go into all sorts of areas. Some would obviously go into renewable energies. Not only does that help bring the cost down, but you know what? That actually increases employment. Isn't that a novel idea, considering that we have people who are struggling with 3 jobs when there could be very good jobs, well-paying jobs out there, career opportunities, and instead we are looking at really being beaten down. And again, people will say, well, how is this fiscally conservative? We're trying to bring people up. It's trickle up, it's not trickle down. We're trying to bring down it's trickle up, not trickle down. We're not trying at all excuse me, what we're not trying to do at this moment is to try to find a way to raise money to pay for energy. It's to bring the cost of energy down. That's what we have to do, bring it down through development of alternative energy sources. Thank you.
Ms. Sherrill, the Supreme Court will rule one of these days on a case that tries to strike down states' congressional maps that were drawn to minimize the power of a particular party. How would you see, what would the perfect system of drawing congressional maps be in your mind? And how would you deal with gerrymandering?
Well, Herb, thank you for that easy question. Appreciate it. I've seen some of the congressional maps across the country, and you can definitely see how gerrymandered districts have affected our system. And when you look at the results across the country of how many states have taken over, they've had the Republican governors, and then they've been able to craft these districts so that they take the majority in the state and take back different seats in the House of Representatives and in the Senate seat, well, not in the Senate, but in the House of Representatives and in their state and local assemblies. We know we have to do something about it. We know we're being underrepresented. I talked to somebody who's working on an amicus brief for the Supreme Court case, and certainly there's modeling that we can do now. There's computer modeling that we can do that can take into account things like demographics, things like towns, so that towns won't be split in half like my own town. Make sure that that race is not being used as a way to sort of marginalize certain votes. So those are the kind of things I can do. We now have the capability of doing some computer models that would really make us have a much more fair system and have more people represented in the political process.
Okay, well, we're going to have one quick raise your hands question. Which of you would support your opponent if you didn't win the primary? Okay.
Excuse me. May I just say one thing? The key is to get rid of Frelinghuysen. I could not accept or support Mr. Frelinghuysen in any way. I can proudly say, after hearing my colleagues up here, that I would absolutely rather vote for any of them, although I'd rather be, by the way, the candidate, don't get me wrong. Okay. step one, priority one for all of us, is to get Frelinghuysen and
Okay.
people like him out.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Washburn, this is a question from the audience. How should, and since you went from Bill Clinton to Dick Nixon, and how should Congress be handling the sexual harassment scandals that it's facing today, and should taxpayers be covering the settlements, or should it be a member's personal liability?
Well, that's easy. A member's personal liability. It shouldn't be the taxpayers picking up the tab for that. This is a real serious problem. I heard about Matt Lauer. I love Matt Lauer. I'm like, how did this happen? And Garrison Keillor, sorry. It's sad. And we men, we have to do better. We have to talk to our sons. We have to talk, well, for me, talk to my students and say this behavior is just no longer acceptable, that we have to start treating women with respect that they deserve. So that's how I feel about it.
Okay. Mr. Bartlett, this is submitted by Sophia in Parsippany. She sent in the question, which I'm shortening this way. Hate crimes against Muslims have skyrocketed, and in making it difficult to feel safe in this country and impossible to fight for basic rights like prayer spaces on college campuses. What would you do to protect Muslim constituents?
Well, Sophia, if you're watching, thank you for your question. This is an issue that I take very, very seriously and very, very personally because although I may not look like it or sound like it, I'm part of an immigrant community. I'm part of an immigrant community because my wife is an immigrant from India who's Hindu, but also because I represent a host of immigrant communities, many of them Muslim, and respond to their concerns on this issue and on so many issues quite a bit. This is an issue that I have stood up on consistently and every opportunity that I get. In 2015, when Chris Christie said, no Syrian refugees are welcome in New Jersey, not even a 5-year-old orphan, I organized my freeholder colleagues to pass a resolution to say, no, this is a place where all are welcome. But we did more than that. We also organized a relief effort so that the 15, now even more than that, Syrian refugee families in Passaic County, including more than 100 children, knew that they were welcome and that they were cared for. We got them winter clothes and boots for their first winter in the northeastern U.S. We hosted an event for them, and this was all sponsored with the support and organization of communities of faith and other generous people from across Passaic County and the 11th District. This is an issue I've stood up to Donald Trump on when it comes to his Muslim ban, as I talked about earlier. And this is an issue that I will continuously stand up on because for me, because of how my faith motivates me and the work that I do, I recognize the importance of faith and of communities of faith, whether they be on college campuses or anywhere, to the lifeblood and the spirit of this place that we call America.
You like to go long. You like to go long. That's not good. Mr. Covert, what responsibility does Congress have for making college affordable, and what should it do or not do?
First of all, I'd like to commend Mr. Bartlett because I support everything he said, and I think we all should. I've stood with pride when some of the congregations, whether they're Jewish, Catholic, or whatever they are, fight bigotry in any way. And when they support the temples or the mosques or whatever religious institutions are victimized or vandalized.
College affordability.
As far as college affordable,
For those kids out of Drew.
I've put 3 children through college, and each child, the amount that I have to pay goes up 7% a year. At this point in time, there's a real question whether college is affordable to everybody, and that's a shame. Whether it's considered a monopoly or whether it's considered a right, there has to be something done to be able to make college affordable to everybody. The community colleges are filling the gap, but there's something wrong with the system when college is so expensive that you can't go. When you go to college and 50 or 60 or 70% of every student comes out and they have debt that they're going to carry for the rest of their life, there's something wrong with the system, and we have to work together. We have to find common ground to fix this, and that also ties in to the tax laws. which can incentivize something like that. Thank you.
Ms. Harris, how would you work across the aisle?
Very gingerly. So this is what I do for a living. I mean, part of what I do is I work with families, especially individuals going through protracted, high-conflict divorces. And sometimes these processes take 2 to 3 years. And you have teams of people that are in very adversarial dynamics and can find no common ground. So one of the things that I do believe about Congress, no matter how much we focus on the headlines, is that work is getting done. Laws are getting passed, and people are working in a bipartisan way. If I go to Congress, being a part and a supporter of the Democratic Party and a lot of institutions around our congressional leaders, they're people that I already know. So I would be going in actually with a known cohort of people that I could begin to sit with and say, look, these are the priorities that I'm dealing with in NJ11. Where can we find a common ground to start? So start with friends, start with the people that know you. But when you're going across the aisle and sitting at the table, I always tell my clients to focus on the power of one. What is the one thing or the one piece of one thing that we can agree on? But that doesn't start until you sit and you listen. And as I said before, part of the work and the training that I have is listening to the client and starting where they're at, because it's not about me. If we're in a protracted conflict, I have to understand what's important to you. When I talk to Republicans in the district, when I talk to people, people are concerned about all of the same things. Their homes, how they're going to pay their bills, and how they're going to take care of their children and take care of themselves as they get older with their health care. Thank you.
Mr. Hewitt, should public dollars be provided for private education either through vouchers or through the support of private charters or even for-profit charters?
I think that there's a lot of problem with the voucher programs. I think that in many ways it is actually used in a discriminatory way to keep a lot of us less than well educated. And the way our system works, the way this country should run, is through an educated electorate. And the most important thing in my belief is a strong public educational system. I don't see where there's any room for anything less. Because what happens is if you have vouchers, all these people all of a sudden start draining to the vouchers, and the people left at the public schools are getting less than the best education they can. And don't we all believe that the most important thing for our children is education, and in fact probably the most important profession, apart from congressperson or lawyer or college professor, whatever. Well, college professor, actually, exactly. It's the educators. That is the most important job that's out there, not anything that any of us do. And I don't say that just because I'm the son of an educator, father of an educator, uncle of an educator. It's so important that we recognize the importance of education at every level, and it should be available to everyone, regardless of their neighborhood, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their origin. And I think that's really what we have to focus on more than anything else. So I think that public money should stay towards taking care of the public school systems. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Sherrill, this is from the room, which apparently already thinks the Democrats are going to be in the majority next year, because they want to know, do you think the next Speaker of the House should be a younger, more leader than Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I like that, because I don't think it should be Paul Ryan. So, so we're already assuming he's gone. I go around the district right now, and I'm really concerned with what's going on here in New Jersey. And actually, I haven't been asked that question, because people here in New Jersey are worried about a lot of things. They're worried about their health care. They're worried about their taxes. They're worried about Planned Parenthood. They're incredibly worried about the environment. What they're not really that worried about right now is who's going to be in leadership after 2018. So I'd be happy to look at who the options are, but right now I'm really focused on what we have to do. And what we have to do is defeat Rodney Frelinghuysen and make sure that Paul Ryan is not in leadership after 2018. That's my goal. And I want to go to Washington, and I want to fight hard for New Jersey. And I want to make sure we have a really strong voice in Congress. That's something that's been incredibly lacking lately in District 11. And so I think it's really important that we get somebody in Congress who's going to fight for our district, who's going to fight for our economy, who's going to fight to get a tunnel to Manhattan. I always hear, Mikey, we don't need a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. We just need a tunnel into Manhattan. And I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And now we want to get Planned Parenthood fully funded, because we've seen just how devastating that's been in this state, to have our governor in a progressive state like New Jersey be the first to cut funding for that. So thank you.
Okay, we have hit the closing statement point of the night, so you're getting 2 minutes now, starting with you, Mr. Washburn.
Thank you, Herb, for hosting. Thank you, New Jersey 11th, and Blue Wave, New Jersey, for hosting us. I've been a teacher for 25 years, college professor for 25 years, and I'm concerned about our country. I love being a teacher, but I love my country, and that's why I came out here. I believe that our country is facing a constitutional crisis, unlike we've seen in 241 years of experience. In drafting our 1787 Constitution, our founding fathers were brilliant people. They realized that we would get a rogue president from time to time because we've had a rogue king. And so they put in place a system of checks and balances. Well, they don't work if the person who's supposed to check decides that they are checked out, that they won't do their job. So that's why I'm here. I'm here because I want to do the job. I want to make sure that Congress holds Donald Trump responsible for his actions. I want to be here I want to be in Congress because our democracy depends on it. I love being a teacher. I could still be a teacher, but my country needs me, and that's why I decided. So I'm asking for your vote in the Democratic primary on June 5th, and if I be so lucky, I'm also asking for your vote in the general election in November. Thank you very much.
Brother?
Like always happens with debates, it just flies by. If you didn't hear something from me and you still have a question, please find me online. Please send me an email, ask me a question. I want to start by thanking again our hosts, Blue Wave and NJ11 for Change. The work that you guys are doing is tremendously inspiring. There's somebody else I want to thank for inspiring a lot before we go, and that's my wife, Kiati. You have... That's the most applause I got on. I'm going to need those seconds back. You have borne on your shoulders so much of this effort and so much of what we're doing. And I have to tell you, I could not have imagined growing up in the country that my journey would take me all the way to Jerusalem where I met you, or that it would bring us here to New Jersey where we have this wonderful life that touches so many parts of the 11th Congressional District. Our first house was in West Orange. That's where we started our family, on Eagle Rock Avenue. And we live in Wayne. My first law job was in Roseland. Kiati teaches at Fairleigh Dickinson University for 15 years now as a full professor, right down the road at, we got an FDU person here somewhere, right down here in Madison. From Montclair, where we go to church at St. John's, to Parsippany, where we go when we want good Indian food. Our lives touch every corner of this district, and having represented a fifth of it for the last 5 years as a freeholder, I am passionate and committed about what we can do in this district together. And I'm so excited by what lies ahead of us. We have to choose a candidate that knows what it takes to win an election like this. I've run for office 3 times. And that's 3 times more than anybody else on this stage. It's a skill set and it's a set of priorities that we need to wield across this district.
Thank you.
I believe we can win it, and I ask for your help.
Thank you. Mr. Colbert?
Thank you, New Jersey 11 for Change, and thank you, Blue Wave, but thank you, everybody, for coming, because all of you are the heroes. You're the ones that have to vote Frelinghuysen out. I have to be personal. I have to let you know who I am and why I'm here. It started, of course, as I said before, when I saw the disrespect for Senator McCain, and when I saw no reaction at all from our public officials. It amplified when I saw the disrespect for the reporter, when I heard nothing come from Congressman Frelinghuysen, and I heard our elected officials supporting the downfall of the ACA, supporting all of the things that we feel are so important. From my point of view, I've spent years and years fighting Wall Street. I was an assistant attorney general, I was a prosecutor. I'm not afraid to fight Wall Street. I was president of the Bar Association, and as president of the Bar Association, we saw a need to fight the drugs in our county. There's a drug court system, and that's now effective because that was something that we saw that was important. And I worked with the Alumni Association to continue that. I was president of the Bar Foundation, and the Bar Foundation works to help battered women. It helps the veterans. We have clinics that we've attended. These are things that have taken years. This is a commitment to the community over many, many, many years. But the important thing is, every single thing that I've done has been nonpartisan. There's not one time when anybody said, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? They've never done that. And when I made the decision to vote, to run, I asked all of the clients and friends and everybody else that I knew, and they said, we don't care. We don't care whether you're Republican. We don't care whether you're a Democrat. We know that you will stand up for the rights of every citizen in this district, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you. Ms. Harris?
Thank you. Thanks, Herb. I wanted to, again, extend my gratitude to NJ11 for Change and also to Blue Wave, and to you as well, Herb, for some very powerful questions and the opportunity to speak to all of you tonight and all of you out there on at Drew and on Facebook Live. I am a businesswoman, an advocate, and a mother. And I have two wonderful girls. One is a sophomore in college, and one is a junior in high school. And I raised them in New Jersey, for the most part. And New Jersey, when I first touched base, it was as a 23-year-old young woman in the town of Orange in Essex County. And Jersey has been a part of my life over the next several decades. And when I talk to people, when I've worked in social work spaces, at Family Connections, at the Mental Health Association of Essex County in Montclair, I've learned a lot about people's journeys. And one of the things that I've learned about, as we talked about tonight, is what are the most important things that affect a person's life. It's education, it's having quality access to quality health care, and it's actually having a path to economic mobility and viability, because as I mentioned before, working class families and middle class families are the engine of this economy and are the engine of this state in New Jersey. We are dealing with some of the highest property taxes in this state, and we have people who have made their economic journey and have gone to school and educated themselves, and they are sitting in their homes wondering how they're going to provide education for their children, and how they're going to hold on to their asset to be able to have it serve them in their retirement. And if there's a catastrophic crisis, what will they do? I'm running because the thing that we always say is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting something different. I stepped into this race because we have Donald Trump as a president and Rodney Frelinghuysen who's absent. And the question I leave with you tonight is who's ready to join me in making real change, because the time is right now. And we need to send different leadership to Congress, and I offer myself as a candidate for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay.
I would also like to thank the sponsors of the event. I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to thank everyone who's listening online. I'd like to thank everyone up here because, frankly, I think we've all learned quite a bit from each other. One is which is that we have a lot more that unites us than divides us. And I think it's important to keep realizing that. And one thing that is crucial to me is that we have a primary on June 5th, which, by the way, is my birthday, so I wouldn't mind 17,000 birthday presents, please, your votes. But what is important and what we have to think about here in this room and elsewhere tonight is that I am running not against any of these people here, but I am actually running against Frelinghuysen right now. And the fact is the only way to get him out efficiently and effectively, is in the primary. So what I ask of each of you is not to turn your backs on your party. I absolutely respect that. But what I ask each of you to do is consider for a moment that you change your affiliation to independent approximately 2 months before June 5th. And on election day, you can decide, depending on how the primary is going for the Democrats, to either continue there or for one day, join and unite with me to get that son of a gun out of office, at which point, by the way, we will have already won a major victory. Because no matter which one of you I would face off with, we've already won. We've gotten rid of the ultra-right who are controlling our lives. So I ask each of you to really consider that one point, to go independent 2 months before. Thank you very much.
I would consult with an election lawyer before you did that.
Thank you.
You actually may not be able to vote in the primary.
Allowed to.
Well, thank you, NJ11, for change. Thank you, Blue Wave. This is wonderful. Thank you, Herb. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jason, Maggie, Lincoln. Thanks for coming tonight. Ike and Merritt, if you're watching at home, go to bed. You know, I've wanted to serve my country almost as long as I can remember. When I was in 5th grade, I told my dad I was going to become a pilot, I was going to go to the Naval Academy, and I was going to serve my country. And so when I see what's going on right now, when I see what's going on in this country, I'm reminded of a lesson that I learned while I was serving in the Navy. The worst thing you can do in the United States Navy is to run a ship aground. And yet often, when a ship runs aground, there's an investigation and you find that people on the bridge of that ship knew it was going to run aground and they didn't say anything. And maybe they didn't say anything because they were scared of the captain. Or maybe they didn't say anything because they thought the other people on the ship might make fun of them. But for whatever reason, they didn't stand up. They didn't stand up and they put themselves ahead of the ship and its crew. And I think that's what's going on in Washington. We have a president who's running this country aground. He's working to undo every value that I have spent my life upholding and protecting. And we have a congressman, Congressman Frelinghuysen, who's that guy on the bridge. Like, he's refusing to stand up and put an end to this. We need better leadership. We deserve better leadership. So that's why I'm so glad to see all of you here tonight. I'm so glad to see the energy that we already have almost a year out, because we can do this. We can fight for the 11th district, and we can provide real leadership that we need here. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all for coming, and drive safe. I think Saley has one more thing to say.
Can we get a round of applause for our candidates? When NJ11 for Change started this journey a year ago, did you guys think that we would have this type of response? Give yourselves a hand, too. This is all on you. Good night, guys.